Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Jev Bjorsell, CEO of ECAD Labs. ECAD Labs, for those who might not know, is the Vancouver-based development team building, maintaining, and supporting world-class tooling, infrastructure, and blockchain chain technologies here in the Tezos ecosystem beyond. Sorry, my voice. Jev is joining us today to bring us up to speed on what the ECAD Lab team has been working on here in the Tezos ecosystem and what it has planned for the exciting year ahead. Hi, Jev. Where are you right now, and how is the weather?
Hey Stu, good to see you. Weather, it's cold, bright, and sunny here. We're pretty used to gloom and rain this time of year, but and that gloom and rain is pretty good for hacking on new tech and products. So it's hard to be inside when it's so sunny.
We'll take it, right? Given that this is not your first appearance here on Tez Talks, I'll dispense with asking you to walk us through your personal journey into the Tezos ecosystem as we usually do. And I'll jump right into talking about ECAD Labs, which I introed very briefly off the top there, and what your team has been working on. First off, can you explain exactly what ECAD Labs is and what its role is here in the Tezos ecosystem for those who might not be overly familiar just yet?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. So ECAD Labs, we're a Vancouver-based development team, and we build primarily open source tools and infrastructure for Tezos, but also with an eye on the broader Web3 blockchain needs. Our mission, generally speaking, is to grow the GDP, the gross domestic product, if you will, of Tezos and blockchains. So how we do this is by empowering developers by making Tezos friendly tools that are well documented, easy to use, and all this up to date with the latest protocols and features. And why does that matter? Um, it matters because by doing this, we lower the barrier to entry. We help new developers and infrastructure operators quickly come into the ecosystem, and so that they can start to build and gain value within our ecosystem.
Okay. And when was ECAD Labs originally founded?
Originally, we kicked the CAD Labs off in 2012 as a software consultancy.
Wow.
That makes the company a teenager at 13. Um, and then we kind of made a pivot into blockchain and Tezos around 2019 after we kind of did some successful open source pilot projects.
Okay. And even in that time, 2019 is in blockchain ecosystem times quite a long time. So how has ECAD Labs and its team evolved in the years since then?
Yeah, so evolution. Uh, yeah, so I mean, as the demand for blockchain solutions sort of like started to grow, and it became less about like this, this weird thing that some like crypto anarchists were working on, and started gaining more broader adoption, like so did our team. Like over the years, we've added engineers, testing specialists, site reliability people, and DevRel folk, and we've brought them into the ecosystem and blockchain generally with a lot of training to give them like a solid footing in this, because when a new technology or a new sort of paradigm comes along, you can't hire for that paradigm because it's new. So what we did was we hired and built a team of really strong specialists in their various fields, and then we sort of like indoctrinated them for to the crypto world.
Okay. And your team is responsible for a laundry list of widely used Tezos ecosystem tools. But there are two in particular that I'm hoping you can bring us up to speed on. But sort of before we do that, it's important to get a clear picture of Tezos X and how that will impact what your team will be working on moving forward. Um, Obviously, Tezos X Factor is quite prominently in any discussion about Tezos ecosystem development in 2025. So for those who might not know, what can you tell us about Tezos X and its roadmap and what they mean for the ongoing evolution of Tezos and its ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. I'll speak about Tezos X as best I can. So ECAD and myself and my teammates, we see ourselves as having a supporting role to the Tezos X vision. I can speak about what I know, and yeah, from my perspective, like Tezos X really it represents the next evolution in scaling for the Tezos ecosystem. It's pretty interesting in how it's using rollups and data availability layers to scale vertically as opposed to horizontally. So this is a bit different from what most people consider Tezos X to be good, or sorry, rollups to be important for. That's scaling horizontally, but with Tezos X, it's more about scaling vertically. And one of the really interesting things, which I think is sometimes lost on people, is that the Tezos X roadmap is bringing multiple ledgers into the Tezos ecosystem. So we have the Tezos L1, which has a smart contract system called Mickelson. And now we're getting Etherlink, which is an EVM compatible ledger that's going to live within that rollup ecosystem. And in the future, my understanding is we're also getting a new type of ledger called Justice, which is spelled JSTZ, which is so it's a fun pronunciation to use JSTC and say justice, but it doesn't actually translate that well on video and oral communication. So I have to spell that one out. And then also the Mickelson virtual machine is going to be another one of these ledgers. So you're going to have these different ledgers running in the Tezos X sort of architecture, and that's going to give the goal there is for it to scale really well. There should be very good liquidity mechanisms between these ledgers, and the scalability, as I mentioned, is very important, and it should allow these ledgers to come and meet developers and the developer skill sets that exist out in the world. So JavaScript is by large and far like the most popular language in the world, and so having a blockchain smart contract environment tailored specifically to that group is a pretty strong value proposition, I would say.
Okay.
I mean, this should. I mean, I think the business case for this and the value proposition is, what sort of why it matters, is it should open the door for large scale dApps and advanced use cases by focusing on these different ledgers. And we're hoping this keeps Tezos nimble and future ready.
Okay.
And then for ECAD Labs role within all of this, we work on projects such as Taquito and Signatory, which we're going to get into more. They're very much Tezos focused, but we see ourselves very much supportive of the whole Tezos X mission. And while we're not going to be doing a lot of work directly in the Etherlink tooling side of things, because that's EVM, we are going to do a lot of sort of supportive work around that to make sure that token transfers and migrations, app migrations, and so on worked really well. So I think we have a valuable part to play in that story.
Perfect. And you just mentioned Taquito there, which is one of the things I was hoping we could talk about today. Before we do, what exactly is Taquito and what's its role here in the Tezos ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. So Taquito is, I mean, for people familiar with blockchain from like other blockchains, in Ethereum you have the Web3.js or Ethers.js. These are development libraries. So for Tezos, Taquito is our JavaScript or TypeScript library that simplifies working with Tezos smart contracts and the Tezos blockchain. So it provides an abstraction on top of the blockchain, so that it makes it very easier for developers, whether they're dApp developers or other types of services developers, to build on top of Tezos. So it's being an abstraction. It's like, if you want to cook an egg in the morning for breakfast, then you go to your fridge and you get the egg out of the fridge and you fry it, and that's you're enjoying many abstractions there around how an egg is produced, because you don't have to work out how to feed a chicken, clean up after a chicken, protect a chicken. You just have an egg in your fridge. And so for Taquito, it takes care of like a lot of the underlying minutia of dealing with a blockchain, such as signing and dealing with RPCs, estimating operations, and it makes it a lot easier. And this allows developers to get up and running very quickly.
Okay, I really enjoyed the egg analogy there. That was great.
That was off the cuff.
Pretty good. I understand Taquito has undergone several updates since your last appearance here on TezTalks. Can you walk us through Taquito's evolution over the past year or so?
Yeah. One of our standing kind of commitments with Taquito, which I've always felt really strongly about, is Taquito being a library. There's many other tools that build on top of it. So pretty much, every decentralized app in the ecosystem, from all your NFT marketplaces to your DeFi protocol projects and so on, they all use Taquito. And as do most of the wallets in the ecosystem as well. They're all built on top of Taquito in some way or another. And then even institutions such as exchanges, they also use Taquito. So it's very important, because Tezos has this on-chain governance thing. It evolves very quickly. So it's very important that Taquito releases and shows up really early in the life cycle of new protocols. Because if we're expecting early adopters to make sure that their systems are working and reliable with the underlying blockchain, they need to make sure that the tools they depend on show up early. And so we continue to ship beta versions like as early as possible when we get new protocol upgrades. We work closely with the core teams in Nomadic and Trilitech and Functory and so on. And which is great. It's a highlight of my job is working and collaborating with these teams. So the early protocol amendment support is something that we've been overachieving on. We sort of set a goal of releasing 2 weeks before protocol amendments get finalized, and that's releasing the final version. We do many beta versions and release canvas before that. Then for new features within Taquito, so some highlights from the last year, we worked on abstractions around ticket transfers. Tickets are an interesting primitive on the underlying blockchain. So ticket transfer support is now supported in the wallet API. We continue to update our Node.js compatibility. And then we also have been doing some interesting work around Wallet Connect integration. That's the technology that connects dApps to wallets. It's a linchpin of the Web3 world, and one that's sort of underappreciated, I think, or not underappreciated, but maybe an unsung sort of component of the Web3 world. And then we work with the wonderful people at Kukai and Beacon, Trilitech and so forth, for a lot of their tools and products that they build on Taquito. Then another, I suppose, community collaboration for Taquito is always very important. We worked closely with Ledger Live this year to help them update their Ledger Live desktop wallet with the latest versions of Taquito as well. We gave him some guidance and advice on the changes that came out around staking, and we also did some collaboration within the ecosystem around the new staking mechanisms on Tezos as well.
Okay. And obviously, you mentioned sort of keeping out ahead of protocol upgrades. Typically, we see several of those each year, which we would expect will happen in 2025. Aside from staying ahead of the protocol upgrades to come, what does your team have planned for Taquito in 2025?
Yeah, so I mean, broadly speaking, Tezos X readiness. I'm not sure what it's going to be. The actual brand name of it is going to be, but there's going to be a Mickelson ledger in the Tezos X roll up sort of roadmap. And I mean, I think there's maybe it's going to be called TezLink. I'm not too sure, but we're going to integrate with that early from Taquito. And then we're also doing a lot of sort of peripheral work around Taquito, working with the up and coming bridging tools and protocols to bridge tokens between the Tezos L1 and Etherlink and these future other Tezos X ledgers as well. We do have a blog post, which is a programmer's tutorial of the life cycle of a token, a Tezos token, as well as contract asset tokens. The life cycle of them going from Tezos L1 up to Etherlink and then back again. So we're trying to demystify or help demystify some of these sort of life cycles and journeys for tokens for developers. Another thing that's in the works, we're working on Trezor hardware wallet support in Taquito. We already have Ledger wallet support as a signer in Taquito, and that allows a lot of the wallets to have an easier time in supporting Ledger hardware wallets. So by adding Trezor support in Taquito, we hope to see more wallets supporting Trezor. I think that's generally pretty good and exciting for the ecosystem to have a hardware alternative to Ledger as well. And then we're going to continue working on the DApp wallet connection stuff with Beacon, and we're also doing some work with Reown / Wallet Connect stuff there as well. So that the ecosystem has more options.
Okay.
And then I suppose the two quick last ones, BLS support, that's a bit more relevant for Signatory, but there's BLS support coming into Taquito also. And then just generally, we're always trying to improve the developer experience, expanding documentation, making our beta releases earlier and more available. So teams can confidently build, like, whether it's like enterprise scale apps or the next degen phenomenon.
Okay. Well, it sounds like another busy year is in the works for your team. The second tool I was hoping we could chat about today, which you just briefly mentioned there, is Signatory, your team's remote signer. For those of us who might not be completely clear on exactly what that means, what exactly does Signatory do?
So Signatory, it's called a remote signer, and I'll back up a little bit. So one of the core concepts or the core pieces of blockchain technology is the private key. Users own a private key, and with that private key, they can effect change. They can transfer tokens. They can put those tokens into different contracts and so on. And so that private key is the crucial piece. And if you're kind of thinking, I mean, analogy, it's a bit weak maybe, but an analogy would be a Michelin star restaurant, and there's like the secret recipe for some particular sauce, and so the head chef guards that recipe with his life. And it's not a recipe he's going to leave hanging around the kitchen on a post-it note for the sous chefs and even the kitchen staff to see. So he's going to protect that recipe and keep it in a vault, maybe offsite somewhere, and he might keep it in his head. and it's protected. So for blockchain developers or validators, so in Tezos we have bakers, and for those bakers to operate, they need to use a private key to sign blocks and sign attestations to keep the blockchain running and secure. Um, the idea of keeping that now those baker operators, they can keep the secret key on their server, and that'll assign operations, but that increases your attack surface. So because the server can be, have vulnerabilities, a hacker can get in there by SSH potentially, and so we want to reduce the attack surface. So what a remote signer does is it lives separately to the baker in this example, and it allows you to store your secret key in a specialized system called either a HSM, which is a hardware security module, or a KMS, a key management system from cloud providers. And so these things are specialized in just storing your key and getting data in, and you can send data into these systems, and they will give you back a signature, but they will never allow you to exfiltrate the key. And so this reduces your attack surface. So those systems, though, they're generally application agnostic. That's a fancy way of saying they don't know anything about Tezos. They don't know what an operation or a transaction looks like for Tezos. So Signatory is the remote signer that sits in between the baker and the key. And it allows the baker to say, hey, I have a block I need to sign. And it sends it off to the remote signer, and that's kind of like putting it into the vault, like into the back room, secret room that has all the security. And the remote signer then puts it into the key management system or HSM, and it gets back a signature and gives it back to the baker. So that's kind of the analogy, I suppose. And by securing your keys separately from your application, you're reducing your risk. That makes it more palatable for people to operate services in the ecosystem.
Okay.
And so Signatory is important for both bakers, but also application developers that are operating oracles. It's also used by exchanges that need to automate withdrawals, for example. So when you go to an exchange and you withdraw your Tezos, and that exchange needs to emit an operation that transfers tokens, and those exchanges also want to protect their keys, so they would use Signatory for that purpose.
Okay. So it effectively allows you to do the things you need to do and sign the things you need to sign without exposing your keys to potential threats.
Yeah, and it reduces your attack surface significantly. It does have there's a couple of more things, I suppose, about why that's important in Signatory. So Signatory, it supports like many HSMs and KMSs. This is important from my perspective because it gives bakers and developers mobility and more options between different clouds providers. Because when Tezos first sort of started up, we had one remote signer solution that supported Amazon HSM, and Amazon's a wonderful service. We do run infrastructure there as well. But if it's the only solution for bakers to run to secure the keys within the cloud, then we get a consolidation of all the bakers being on a single infrastructure provider, Amazon. And so that's not good for the network security. So Signatory supports Amazon, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Compute, and then it also supports several technologies for local signing or for local operations, such as HashiCorp Vault, YubiKey HSMs, and the Ledger Baking app. And so this gives choice and mobility.
And I understand you've added several new features to Signatory recently. So can you tell us a bit about those and how they will impact Signatory's functioning within the Tezos ecosystem moving forward?
So we've implemented support for, as I mentioned, HashiCorp Vault. And that was actually a contribution from the ecosystem. So it's one of the fun things about open source software is we get contributions. We also have a duty to test and maintain those over the course of the product as well. So, and then we've increased some of our support around Amazon. We now support AWS DynamoDB storage. So DynamoDB is this globally fault tolerant data store in Amazon, and we use that for watermark tracking. What watermark tracking does is it allows Signatory uh, uh, prevent you from signing the same operation twice. And this is a very, very important thing when you're securing the network as a baker. Is there's in the protocol of Tezos there's a mechanism that says if you try to bake the same block twice, you will get slashed. And so when you bake the same block twice, you will get two rewards. But the slashing mechanism slashes your locked tokens, and so that you end up on net losing tokens as opposed to gaining tokens. And so that's to keep everybody honest. Now, nobody intentionally double bakes because they know that disincentive in the protocol lives there. But double baking still does happen, and that's typically happens during baker migrations when someone's upgrading, or if they're trying to run like a high availability setup with multiple bakers. And this allows you to run multiple bakers in high availability, and gives you some confidence against double baking and losing some of your locked tokens.
Okay. And do you, oh,
To couple more things. We worked on security and policy enhancements for Signatory. So it supports flexible policy hooks. This is really neat for institutions that have like bespoke or very specific security considerations. So they can have a hook that comes out of Signatory when it's about to sign something and saying, "Hey," and it would hook into that institution's custom service saying, "I want to sign this. Do you approve?" And then that custom service might check, for example, a list of known bad addresses. Or it might say, "Oh, this is over 500 Tez, don't sign it." And that gives institutions flexibility and to really tailor things to themselves without having to modify Signatory directly themselves. Um, and then we support JWT based authentication and so on. So really just a lot of features so that operators of Signatory can really have like defense in depth approaches to their key management.
Okay. And it sounds like an ongoing evolution with a lot of complex problems to solve as you go. So are there any big plans for Signatory in the year ahead?
We've got an interesting roadmap, I believe. So we are working on BLS signing in Signatory. So BLS is a sort of an advanced, fancy new encryption algorithm, and it's probably going to play a significant role in the Tezos X roadmap. So we're adding support for BLS signing support in Signatory. Now, implementing BLS support itself isn't actually that difficult, but one of the challenges with BLS is that HSMs and KMSs are generally very, very slow and conservative in supporting new encryption algorithms. So with BLS coming into the Tezos protocol, there's we obviously want people to make use of these new features when they show up in the new protocol. But there's a big challenge for bakers and institutions to start using BLS because none of the existing HSM and KMS systems support that key curve. So we need to get a bit more creative, and so that brings me into the next part is we're doing a lot of research and work in trusted execution environments. These are called TEEs, which is TEE. And we're starting work on AWS Nitro enclave support, and this is a specialized sort of secure enclave that Amazon has. It allows you to do encryption signing in software as opposed to hardware, and they have some very cool and novel ways of making sure that stays secure. But if we just do AWS, then we're back to the whole problem that I addressed in the beginning, is that we don't want consolidation on AWS, but it is the first one we're going to do. Beyond that, we're doing research around Intel SGX, for example, so that we can do signing and trusted execution environments on Intel's commodity hardware. And this is all to be prepared so that when this feature does come into Tezos, operators and bakers and so on have a path to actually using it. We want to remove those roadblocks ahead of time.
Okay. This is all great stuff so far. I'm really excited to learn more, but before we dive into the nitty-gritty, are you ready for the world-famous TezTalks lightning round?
Oh, I do have one more item about Signatory.
Please.
So I'm not ready, Stu. We are also planning on, so we're doing some re-architecting of Signatory itself. And what we want to do here is we want to allow Signatory to support Etherlink and maybe Justice in the future as well. So it can be the signing solution for the plurality, for all of the ledgers in the Tezos X roadmap. And so this is important because it again, it's sort of like a second order thing to worry about. But when institutions and exchanges and so on start supporting these different technologies and blockchains, every time they do a new ledger or blockchain, it sucks on an operational expense sort of lens to have to invent or acquire a lot of different infrastructure for every chain. Okay. So for Signatory, we're going to support signing for Etherlink and maybe also Justice. And so this allows institutions to have a single signing solution that their DevOps team can build operational experience upon. And trust, and then support all of these things. So it keeps the cost down of adoption for these institutions, and I think that's a very sort of important point that is sort of like missed sometimes.
Absolutely. Is there anything else, or are you ready for the lightning round now?
I'm ready for the lightning round.
Great. Remember, there are no wrong answers. This is just for fun, so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you a night owl or an early riser?
An early riser, definitely.
Exercise or naps?
I can exercise when I have to. I can't always nap when I have to. I would choose naps.
Fair. Movies or video games?
To have the time to play video games. No, it's movies.
Fair. What's your favorite country to visit for a vacation?
I mean, like Canada maybe, but I suppose I should be less boring. I'd probably say Portugal, more specifically Lisbon. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. If you were elected king of the world, what's the first thing you would do?
I would abolish the monarchy.
Name one thing you will never do again.
Geez. I have no regrets, man. I can't think of anything.
Fair. That's more than fair. What's the secret to happiness?
Secret to happiness. Don't chase it. Chase satisfaction. And if you get satisfied, you'll be happy for a bit. And when you're not, go find some more satisfaction to chase.
Okay. Do you have any pets?
Yeah, I have a border collie named Poppy. She's full of energy. Yeah, she's a dote.
And finally, what's your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Walk my dog. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent answers. This concludes the TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. Okay. Now that we've talked about 2024 and what you and the ECAD Labs team have been working on, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the exciting year ahead. This is our first TezTalks episode of 2025, so I'd really like to hear your take on what you expect to see both here in the Tezos ecosystem and the blockchain space more broadly in the year to come.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think we've seen a lot of fragmentation in the broader blockchain ecosystem, and like rollups and like layer twos, they have a strong bearing on that fragmentation, and that gives you a user experience hit. So having more of a monolithic chain has a lot of a strong value proposition to users, and so we've seen Solana have great success in this, and I think Tezos X has a really strong thesis in this sense as well, because it's going to reduce friction and allow liquidity between ledgers. Um, I do tend to continue to believe, though, that blockchain actually isn't a zero sum game of one chain that's going to take it all. There's going to be a set of chains that take most, and there's many are going to become irrelevant. If you look at, for example, Solana, they've been wildly successful, and they have massive throughput. Now they're kind of banking on Moore's law, and I'm very impressed by Tolly and Mert and everybody around the Solana ecosystem and what they're achieving there. But I think the pier is only so long for that strategy of continuing to optimize. You can only rewrite it in C++ so many times. You can only, like Moore's law, there is a limit to that. And if Tezos X Tezos X is different actually, which is good. But if Solana ends up onboarding, the 500 million users or a billion users, that thesis is going to start to strain significantly. On the flip side of it is the modular era and the composability and so on. So the incentives to solve the cross chain user experience, the incentives are so damn high, and there's so many people working on this, and they haven't really got there yet. It is improving; it's getting better for sure, but the incentives to solve that are enormous, and humans are ingenious, and I believe that we will get to the point where that sort of friction goes away. So or is solved, I should say, not goes away. It's solved well. So uh, that's what I see. A big thing for is multi-chain focus. The cross-chain user experience, and Tezos X is doing some really novel work in this area with the multi-ledger paradigm, and I think I hope to see more bridging and composability between the Tezos X sort of architecture and the rest of the broader ecosystem blockchains.
Okay. And, in terms of getting that message out there, you're a pretty active presence at blockchain events all across the world. I understand you attended several in 2024. Can you talk a bit about why you feel like it's important for ECAD Labs and Tezos to have a presence at these types of events?
Yeah, it's. I think it's really important. Echo chambers aren't a good thing, and they happen in blockchain projects naturally. So it's important to get out of your bubble, meet other people within the blockchain industries and beyond it as well. And it's also important for people who are involved in Tezos to show up at other conferences. They don't necessarily have to speak or have a big presence, but just to organically show up and they informally represent, and that keeps those little pieces help keep Tezos active in the broader industry narrative.
Okay, and you attended this year's TezDev in Belgium. What were your big takeaways from that event in particular?
Yeah, the TezDev this year was great. So it was a side event positioned alongside ECC in Belgium. Whoever did the organization of it and chose the venue did a great job. The actual venue was wonderful. The speaking, like the auditorium, was fantastic. It was very comfortable. It was just great to meet everybody within the ecosystem, and there's a lot of fresh faces and sort of new excitement as well around Etherlink. We have new people coming in from that are more experienced in the EVM world, and they're coming on board to Etherlink. So that was wonderful to meet them. And it was also some excellent talks at TezDev. Arthur did a wonderful presentation on the Tezos X feature roadmap, and then there was a great panel discussion between Arthur and some of the people from the Ethereum Foundation and Espresso Tech, and that was moderated by Tarun from Gauntlet. Those type of panels are really valuable because they do help, ask good questions and broaden everybody's horizons. It really teases out a lot of tacit knowledge from these big brains in our industry.
Okay. And I just wanted to circle back on something you mentioned a little while ago about this new address type that uses an encryption algorithm called BLS, which allows signature aggregations. How much can you tell us about that development and what it means for the Tezos ecosystem?
There are plans to support BLS on the validator level. There's some tickets in GitLab, there's the understanding I have is that I believe the core teams and by extension the ecosystem, we want to reduce block times on the Tezos layer 1. This is very important and has a huge UX and scalability implications. So every time a block is signed in Tezos, there's a baker that signs it, but then there's many more bakers that has to attest to the correctness. So they validate the block and they sign an attestation saying like, I checked this block and I believe it's good. So it's sort of like everybody's checking each other's work. The problem is if the active validator set grows, or even we have a number of active validators in Tezos bakers. All of those attestations need to be appended to the block headers of every block that attests the previous block, and that's a lot of data and it's a lot of extra processing. So BLS is this really interesting encryption algorithm that supports something called signature aggregations, and so many validators can sign a block, and then each of those signatures gets submitted from every validator. And I might have some of the little minutiae wrong here, so I'm sure core dev is going to come at me after and try and slap me, figuratively. But each of those signatures then can be aggregated, and they get aggregated down to one signature that is a representation mathematically proven that many validators signed it. And so you reduce the amount of signatures that have to be attached to each block. And so this reduces a lot of overhead, a lot of data storage, and that's a path to reducing block times quite significantly.
Okay. And aside from the things that we've already covered, what else does the ECAD Labs team have in the works for the Tezos ecosystem in 2025?
Let's see. We focusing again. I mean, the Tezos X being supportive of that is really sort of enormous to us, because I think it is the North Star of the Tezos ecosystem and journey. So we're big believers in these things. They don't get built by an individual team. And the diversity in the ecosystem is important. So we're excited of supporting the Tezos X vision very much. Outside of what we've spoken about, I think I've kind of covered everything at the top of mind. We are excited about enhancing, making the user experience for dApps to connect to wallets is very important, and there's interesting nuance around that as well. So in Tezos we have Beacon, which is sort of like a Tezos domestic like technology, if you will, and it allows you to connect your decentralized applications to your Tezos wallets. there is there's some nuance and some strategic planning that we need to do around this, because when we get into Etherlink, for example, that's an EVM chain.
Mm.
And so one of the advantages of Etherlink, and I believe why was the strategic impetus to doing Etherlink, was that it allows us to Etherlink can users can make use of all of the tooling around the EVM, so they can readily use MetaMask or Phantom or any of these other really popular wallets with the Etherlink chain. Now, those wallets, they support a technology called Wallet Connect, and Wallet Connect is a multi-chain technology allowing you to connect your dApps to your wallets. So we do have a little challenge, or there's a strategic thing we need to figure out here, and there's work happening on it, I'm sure. But for a user to have a good experience that's working between Tezos and Etherlink and Justice and other chains, we need to make sure that there's a cogent approach to how the dApps connect to the wallets in both Tezos and Justice and EVM chains broadly. So that's one of the challenges I and we are interested in trying to make good choices that will be happy with on the longer frame.
Well, I suppose, if when we're talking about Tezos X and we're talking about the rollout of Etherlink and we're talking about Justice, um, these are this transition toward Tezos X is significant, and there's probably a lot of issues that are going to come up and problems that need to be solved, and we probably don't have a completely clear picture of what 2025 and that transition is going to look like. But it's good to know that there'll be teams like yours there ready to troubleshoot these issues as they arise.
Yep,
Um,
I agree.
I have a bunch of questions that we didn't get to, but unfortunately, we're almost at the end here. To all our viewers, thanks for watching. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks. We'd love to hear from you. Jev, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks working behind the scenes to keep Tezos at the bleeding edge of the blockchain technology space. Is there anything else that you'd really like to mention or touch on before we sign off here?
No, I think that's about it. Hopefully, I get to see more Tezonians at conferences this year, possibly at TezDev, and maybe other events. And yeah, as always, wonderful speaking to you, Stu. Thank you to you and the
You as
Tezos
well.
Commons for running TezTalks. And yeah, hopefully I can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Jev Bjorsell, CEO of ECAD Labs. Now let's go make 2025 the year of Tezos.